Welcome to today's edition of the Anaglyph Jukebox. You never know what you'll find on the old jukebox. Let's press B31. Okay, we've got Forbidden 3D, the tale of Dr. Fredric Wertham. The greatest villain in comic book history? The Joker, Dr. Doom, Lex Luthor, the Green Goblin, Dr. Sivana, Magneto, Darkseid, Loki, Thanos, Bane, Ultron, the Red Skull. A good case could be made for every one, and the Anaglyph Jukebox is here to tell you you'd be wrong each time. The greatest villain in comic book history is Fredric Wertham, author of Seduction of the Innocent. He was responsible, more than any other single person, for an industry-wide collapse that drove scores of artists and writers into other fields back in the 1950s. How bad was it? There were 650 different titles published in 1954. 2 years later, that number dropped to 250. More than 800 people lost their jobs, according to David Hajdu in The 10-Cent Plague. Ray Zone did 3D process separations for over 150 comic books, but he wrote just one. This one, Forbidden 3D, with art by Chuck Roblin, including a gorgeous painted cover. I believe Ray felt that as a fan and historian of both comics and 3D, this was an important story to tell. Among Wertham's claims, crude female nudes were hidden in drawings of muscles and tree bark. Today we'd recognize this as pareidolia, like seeing a horsey up in the clouds. Wonder Woman is a lesbian into bondage. Bondage, yes. Lesbian, no. She had a boyfriend. Batman and Robin are gay. Okay, that one is true. Superman is an alien fascist. All right, that one is true too. Damn. In 1954, as a court-appointed paid psychiatric expert in a gang-related trial for the Brooklyn Thrill Killers, the 18-year-old gang leader admitted to reading pornographic comic books, the infamous Tijuana Bibles. These are not the comic books sold on newsstands to the general public, remember. Wertham's unsupportable conclusion was that the young man had been corrupted by comics and they were to blame for his crime. He made no distinction between the clandestinely printed and distributed Tijuana Bibles and the mainstream comic book industry. In addition to resulting in the creation of the industry's self-policing Comics Code Authority, more than 100 acts of legislation were introduced on the state and municipal levels to ban or limit the sale of comic books. Specific comic book titles, using words like terror or zombies, were outlawed in New York, Connecticut, Maryland, and other states, and ordinances to regulate comics were passed in dozens of cities. 3 superheroes survived: a fascist, a faggot, and a dyke. Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. But only because they generated so much cash outside the comic book field in merchandising rights. 56 years after his bombshell of a book was published, Wertham's manuscript collection at the Library of Congress was unsealed in 2010. Carol Tilley, a University of Illinois librarian and information science professor, undertook the task of evaluating his research. Her conclusions, published in 2012, were withering. Quote, Wertham manipulated, overstated, compromised, and fabricated evidence, especially that evidence he attributed to personal clinical research with young people, for rhetorical gain. In addition, Wertham used a non-representative sample of young people who were already mentally troubled. He misrepresented stories from colleagues as being his own experiences. Wertham manipulated statements from adolescents by deliberately neglecting some passages while rewriting others so that they better suited his absurdly reductionist thesis: comic books cause juvenile delinquency. In other words, Carol Tilley revealed Seduction of the Innocent to be a hack job, a screed that whipped up a national moral panic unsupported by any facts. Hey, 1950s, paranoid much? In 1959, Wertham tried to sell a book about the harmful effects of television on children, The War on Children. He failed to find a publisher. Was Wertham's last book an apologia to the industry he had nearly destroyed? In The World of Fanzines, 1974, he wrote that fanzines were a, quote, constructive and healthy exercise of creative drives. This book led to an invitation for Wertham to address the New York Comic Art Convention. He was met with suspicion and heckled. He never wrote about comic books again.